Cave diving. Why? Why strap on breathing apparatus and plunge beneath the water in a cave where your life hangs by a thread? It's madness. Some chase the technical challenge, some are seeking recognition, but many focus on the social side. But in the purest form is the desire to see what lies beyond the edge of the map. The psychologist Daniel Berlin proposed the theory of epistemic curiosity, where our attention is drawn by something unusual, which triggers a desire for knowledge. Personally, I prefer Dave Brooks' explanation. Dave, a prolific Leeds caver in the 1960s, was sat in Nizam's curry house when he said, "Cave exploration is better than sex because you don't know what happens at the end of a cave." This is the story of how scratching the explorer's itch led to the explorations at the end of La Source Bleue in France. I can remember exactly the moment when I decided to start cave diving. It was 1986, and I was reading through back issues of the CDG newsletter when I came across a description by Jeff Eden of diving downstream from Kingsdale Master Cave in 1976. It read, "An area of low arches was encountered, seemingly presenting 5 different exits, the larger of these heading towards Cailed Head." Well, the rest is history, as the connection with Cailed Head was made in 78, but I was fascinated by the possibilities from the other 3 exits, which had been unexplored for a decade. Where did they go? The cave diving group was formed with a primary objective to explore submerged caves and cave passages. It's not entirely true now, but back then, to be a cave diver was to be an explorer. In the 1980s, it was relatively easy to start exploring through cave diving. In 1987, I bought a cylinder, demand valve mask and hood and headed to Chapel Dale. I joined the CDG. I met with Andy Goddard, also known as Alien for his otherworldly appearance. Over the next 2 years, we succeeded in not killing ourselves and made some modest new explorations in the sumps of the Yorkshire Dales. It was hard to find big sumps to explore, so in the summer of 1989, I jacked in my job and headed to France to visit some of the classic diving regions. In the company of Alien, Phil Murphy, Kev Little and John Bonwick, we toured the Lot, the Aude, Ardèche, Vercors and Doubs. Over the course of 2 months, we visited over 20 of the most famous cave diving sites in France and made 1 or 2 small discoveries. We ended our tour at La Source Bleue in the Doubs. It had been dived the year before by John Cordingley, who said it was well worth a visit, but was blocked at 100 metres by a giant spider's web of lines and wire. La Source Bleue is a pretty resurgence pool in the picturesque valley of Couzance in the Doubs department of the east of France. It produces about 1 cubic, which is a similar amount of water to Wookey Hole, and has a large catchment area. The most distant sink is the Puits Fenoz, where the water disappears on the plateau some 150 metres above the source. Then it travels 8 kilometres under the wooded valleys to appear at a beautiful pool of crystal clear water. The original exploration of La Source Bleue was by Jochen Hasselmeyer in 1969. At that time, he was finding new passage at such a prolific rate that he was struggling to fit enough dive line onto his reel. His innovative solution was to use piano wire, which enabled him to carry 1 kilometre of line at one go. He explored 110 metres into the first air bell of La Source Bleue, where he lost the way on, but he left the piano wire in place. Then between 1972 and 1976, SHAG, the Société Hétéromorphe des Amateurs de Gouffre, pushed on into 2 tight rifts and found some dry passage above, extending the total known cave to 600 metres, but they were unable to find the master cave that was clearly there. Over the years, the combination of wire and multiple lines gave the site a reputation as a killer cave. Very few people dived there. We arrived in 1989, when both sink and resurgence were barely explored. The potential for new exploration was massive. John Bonwick was still a teenager and full of enthusiasm, so he dived first to take advantage of the clear water. Then Kev and I dived together in a wake of poor visibility. John sailed over the mess of broken lines and surfaced in the 110 metre airbell. Kev and I only made it 90 metres before a scary mass of almost invisible tangled wire turned us back. Swimming out, John realised the danger, so returned to the airbell, hoping the visibility would improve. It was an anxious wait for him. Kev and I were starting to think he'd become yet another statistic by the time he finally surfaced. Clearly, the cave had huge potential, but it would require a lot of work to make progress. Next July, Alien and I headed down to the Doubs in my white Ford Cortina, which we nicknamed the White Elephant due to its massive carrying capacity. We laid siege to La Source Bleue for 2 weeks. Every day we dived, we filled cylinders, and we prepped for the next dive. Armed with wire cutters, we cut the wire into 6-inch sections, stripped out all the thin string, and laid a stout blue British dive line. The rock was thinly layered, and there were many solution holes an inch or two punched right through ribs of rock. These made perfect belay points, so the new line was bomb-proof. In the sump, we found the helmet of a previous diver with the light still in place. It was a sobering thought to imagine the condition in which that diver exited the sump without their helmet. By Thursday of the second week, we had relined the sumps and pushed all the previous limits, but made no progress. It was almost time to go home, and we were feeling a bit despondent. Now, cave diving exploration 101 is to always look up. It's easy to forget when you're diving along with your face down, but if you're struggling to find the way on, always look up. And there it was. Not at any previous limit, but halfway through sump 2. We surfaced in a kicking water airbell and rigged a washing line to hang our diving gear on. Then, by combined tactics, we squeezed up through some boulders into a massive new passage. I said, I've always wanted to run screaming down a railway tunnel-sized virgin passage. So Alien turned to me and said, well, go on then. And so we did, all the way to the streamway in a master cave. It's the most amazing feeling to discover a new master cave with your best mates at the 11th hour, after weeks of hard work and years of research. That is why we go cave diving. The main route was impressive with many side passages. In reference to its size and the car we'd travelled in, we called it the Elephant Gallery. We just had time for one more trip to survey and photograph around 700 metres cave. We left it wide open and headed home. Now, La Source Bleue had a reputation as a killer cave, so when we hadn't returned for many hours, a local had got worried and called out the rescue. The circus was in full swing when we surfaced, with people running around, the brew wagon setting up, and a police dog sniffing the water. Much explaining was needed. When we returned to the campsite, the owner ran around shouting, "Phantom! Phantom!" She thought she was seeing a ghost. As the police had informed her, we were dead, searched our tents, and taken away our passports. The following year, the crack was mighty. A team of 15 divers assembled in Ornans in Whitsun 1991, and for a week we blitzed the cave, with teams diving every day in relays. At Camping Le Chanet, there was a bunkhouse with a dozen bunks opening into a communal area. After that first day, we arrived back late, elated from new discoveries, and celebrated well into the night. The next morning, the owner was surprised by the number of empty bottles, so brought us a large box for recycling. By the end of the week, we'd filled 6 boxes. We were gripped by exploration fever, and information was passed on organically rather than systematically. Those new to the system had a lot to learn. Even finding the resurgence was a challenge for one team, as La Source Bleue, or the Blue Pool, is quite a popular name in France. On their first day, they drove almost to Switzerland to arrive at the wrong resurgence. This was remembered when the passage discovered the next day was unkindly named Slaphead Goes to Switzerland. The following day, Alien and I were pushing into unknown territory. I was stood on a boulder about 1 metre cubed when it rolled over. I fell to the floor and the boulder crashed onto my foot. I looked down to see my foot trapped beneath the huge rock. I felt physically sick, waiting for the adrenaline to wear off and the pain to wash over me, but nothing happened. My foot had fallen into a tiny solution pocket and the rock had simply closed the lid. Gingerly, I pulled my foot out unscathed, glad that I didn't have to hop home. In a week, we explored and surveyed 2.4 kilometres of new cave to bring the total to 3.7 kilometres. That same year, the group Spéléo Mandeure extended the Puits Fenoz to 635 metres in length. There still remains 6 kilometres and 150 metres height difference between the two systems, and the through trip remains an exciting possibility. In an age flooded with instant information, cave exploration remains somewhere where you can disconnect from the modern world and reconnect with what is truly the human condition. The risks increase, but the rewards can be immense. For me, those trips to La Source Bleue epitomise what it means to be an adventurer and an explorer. Challenge, uncertainty, reward, fellowship, and a mighty party. I made friendships that have lasted a lifetime. I found one more thing at La Source Bleue. In 1991, I met George, and we later married. Cave exploration can have unexpected consequences. Mind how you go.